Okay, everybody, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to JGL's webinar, Finding the New Normal in the Event Industry, How Acting Now Can Help You Build Your Business in the Future. I'm Tracy Lawler of JGL Food Service Consultants. We work with venues and cultural institutions across the country on everything related to food service, so cafes, restaurants, catering, and events. Joining me from JGL is Brooke Botwinick, Senior Associate, Colleen Geyer, Junior Associate, and our resident Zoom expert. And we've assembled a great panel today for you. We wanted to have this webinar because ever since the COVID pandemic started, we've been having conversations with clients, friends, industry colleagues across the country to understand what's happening to their event business, what the trends are, what they're doing to continue to get business now and to prepare for reopening. So before I introduce the panelists, just a couple of housekeeping details. We are recording this today, so sometime next week we will have it available on our website and other social media. And we are going to hold some time for questions. We will do that towards the end of the webinar, and we do ask that you use the Q&A feature as opposed to the chat feature. You can do that whenever you'd like to, and we will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the session. So I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves and their background, and starting with Jan DeMarzo, VP of Development from Newman's Kitchen.
Thank you, Tracy. Happy Friday, everyone. My name is Jan DeMarzo. I'm the VP of Development for Newman's Kitchen. Newman's Kitchen is an off-premise catering company located in Long Island City. In 2016, we established a local branch in Philadelphia of Newman's Kitchen. I oversee that operation. We are an off-premise caterer. We cater and our clients are academic presidents, a very high-profile list of clients. We are not venue-driven. We are truly an off-premise caterer. My previous world, I worked for Compass. I was a vice president of the East Coast for Wolfgang Puck, along with Restaurant Associates, and I have a lifelong history of working with cultural centers and private institutions, as well as large corporate environments. So I'm very grateful to be here today, and I hope at the end of this we can all share best practices. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jan. And Natalia Lascaris?
Hi, I'm Natalia. I'm with the Peabody Essex Museum in the very funky and historic town of Salem, Massachusetts. We're about 20 miles north of Boston. We just finished in September a large renovation project, so we were raring to go with lots of great new events, and everything is put on hold right now. But I oversee the rentals, so we do corporate and social, and I also work in tandem. I'm the liaison for our in-house caterer. So we're glad to be here today and share any information we can and work together as a team. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. And next we have Adelie Cabrera, VP of Operations for Constellation Culinary.
Hello, everyone. I'm in our commissary, as you can see, where we're doing some work for elderly and homebound seniors, and so we've been working quite a bit these days, different to our normal type of work. I'm VP of Operations for Constellation Culinary Group. I oversee our southern region, so that is the state of Florida and North Carolina. I'm from Miami, native of New York, but have been in Miami for the last 22 years. Work with Constellation for the last 6.5 years when they moved into this market in Miami with the Perez Art Museum. Currently, I oversee the Perez Art Museum, the Frost Science Museum, the Norton Museum of Art, Sarasota Art Museum, and our North Carolina business, which includes La Belle Helene and a business account under the name of Bearings. We also have a pretty large and extensive off-premise brand. It is still called Constellation Culinary, but it is off-premise, where we work in, all of the major cultural institutions and private homes in Miami and South Florida. So that's me. Happy to be here. Thanks, Tracy, for the invite.
Great, absolutely. And then we have Bobby Severini, Director of Events and Catering for the Wildlife Conservation Society.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robert Severini. Everyone that knows me calls me Bobby. Currently, I am the Director of Events and Catering. The team and I oversee 5 parks for the Wildlife Conservation Society. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but the Wildlife Conservation Society is a global nonprofit. We own and operate the Bronx Zoo and the New York Aquarium, and we also run the Central Park Zoo, Queens Zoo, and Prospect Park Zoo. The team and I oversee almost 500 events per year throughout these parks. The 2 parks, Bronx Zoo and the Aquarium, we actually do our own in-house catering. The other 3, we partner with great off-premise caterers to do our events. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Bobby. So I think that as we look at this as a consultant, certainly looking back to the 2008 economic decline, we all saw that corporate events really dried up. Social events were proved to be a little bit more recession-proof. And in talking to events, venues, and caterers across the country, we're certainly hearing from many that social events are still booking. There was a recent report done by the Wedding Report surveying wedding clients, and it showed that about 26% of clients who had weddings booked for this year had elected to move to later in 2020. Another 26.5% had elected to move to 2021. 42% were actually holding their date. And the good news is only 5.5% were canceling altogether. So I think that's great news for the industry. For all of you folks out there who are trying to manage your event rental budgets, certainly it does mean that there may be some shifting. But I think we've heard from many of our panelists here today that they are seeing inquiries and they are getting bookings. So the first question we want each of the panelists to address is, what type of inquiries are you getting right now, and what type of business is booking? And let's start with Jan.
Okay, our business is, I'd say 60% social, inclusive of large galas, and 40% split between academic and corporate. So for us, the corporate business right now is non-existent. There are no incoming inquiries. Everybody's quiet. All the clients I reach out to have the same story, basically. We don't know what's happening. Stay tuned. We hope to do something later in the spring. As far as social, we are definitely getting more inquiries, but the inquiries are different. The brides who are calling, first they'll ask us about a date availability. The second question is, what is your cancellation policy? Do you charge for changing dates, or are there any booking fees required if we change a date? So that's a whole new window for us. In the past, price point, what is your menu? Now it's all about cancellation fees. So we're finding that if it's an event for the fall, they're a little slow in committing. If it's an event for next year, they're definitely anxious to get a date settled. Let me send you a deposit. We'll talk about the menu later on. A good percentage of our business is academic. And there is very little activity for the spring. All of our event planners at University of Penn and Drexel are working remotely. They're heavily into the planning for the fall events, but they all seem to be coming up with the same question. I don't know where the event will be. I don't know what the guest count will be. What can you do differently so I can sell this and make everyone feel comfortable? So the inquiries have definitely done a 360 on the information we've received in the past versus today. Today, it's all about safety and what can you do to protect us from what's going on today.
Great, thank you. And Natalia, what about you? I know when we spoke, you are booking some business and some different types of business.
Yeah, we are. So we are still seeing some corporate for 2020, for the end of 2020, definitely. I think, you know, the message I'm getting from them is that when this is over, they want to gather with their clients that stuck with them through this time, or maybe an employee appreciation event, again, for the employees that are working during this. So I am seeing some corporate, which is nice. For social, for 2020, I'm seeing people who maybe couldn't find a date in their existing venue and they're looking at other venues to see if we have dates available, or they've scaled down and they're looking for options for smaller get-togethers. You know, small reception with just 20 people. Another thing that I'm seeing is that maybe they had a wedding planned in a different part of the country, but most of their family is, you know, I'm in New England, so most of their family's in New England. So now they're looking at a location where guests aren't going to need to travel quite as much. I've gotten a few of those. And then we're getting kind of regular inquiries for 2021. People are going to get married again, and they're excited to be planning. So, so we're still getting those. And then we talked a little bit, you know, fundraisers. We were talking yesterday. We're still getting nonprofits who are looking forward to doing fundraisers, which we do very few, but that's something that we're talking with them about.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And Adelie, what are you seeing?
So in our venues, we're seeing much slower lead generation. Obviously, I think that, you know, people, Miami being such a destination and people really so seasonal and a destination, whereas people come here for specific events like Art Basel or, you know, food and wine festivals or boat shows and those kinds of things. The fact that those events may be up in the air is going to absolutely have an influence on the way that our year pans out. So like, for instance, we know already that the Basel fair in Basel, Switzerland has moved its dates. And so that will definitely probably affect Basel, Miami. And so we are kind of at a standstill with a lot of the corporate and destination related events that we normally book. As far as our social events, we are continuing to see inquiries. We've booked events, we've received deposits and signed contracts. So that's doing well. And I think that some people, you know, some really smart and savvy people are taking advantage of the fact that most people have stopped booking events and have kind of put a standstill on it and are getting some great dates at, you know, venues that generally aren't available. You know, they're going right in there and getting some really fantastic dates in places like Vizcaya and things like that. I will say, and this was really phenomenal news and very promising, that we heard that our client from this past Super Bowl, they've already started working on next year's Super Bowl, which really is so uplifting, because that means hopefully that the sports world will, you know, rebound in some way. And we, you know, we're thrilled for them, and hopefully, you know, and for Tampa, whoever's in Tampa.
Great. Adelie, I just want to ask a clarification question. Are you finding that venues are significantly reducing their fees right now in order to book business?
No, I don't. No.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting that venues are, but there's more dates available than there would have been, because people have moved dates or canceled events. So there's dates available now that weren't available a month ago.
Gotcha, great. And I'm glad to hear that, because that would just be something I would recommend to everybody on the call who is a venue or a museum. Don't think about really lowering your rates. There's some great ways that you can entice people to come in, but you certainly don't want to do a full-scale lowering of your rates. So Bobby, let's hear from
absolutely.
you.
As someone overseeing 5 properties, I have to agree with that statement. You know, supply and demand, but our business model is driven probably to 60 to 70% corporate and nonprofit revenue. We only do about 30, maybe 40% social. However, this past week, we received about 24 leads. Of the 24 leads, 22 of them were social, all weddings actually. We haven't seen a lot of bar mitzvahs, which is odd, but the weddings are still coming in. We are actually still receiving some corporates, drips and drabs, but we received 2 or 3 this week. One that I saw was for later this year, and the other one was for 2021. Monday morning, my first email that I read, we had 4 deposits that came in for weddings for 2021. So that was a good sign of faith. The interesting thing is usually we put a 2-week to 4-week hold on a date for a client. Obviously, with everything going on, we've extended that courtesy. A lot of the large financial firms and law firms, they host their events with us at the Central Park Zoo. June is a very busy month. Some of them have postponed to September, October, which is clogging up our calendars, and it is making it very difficult for us to operate in those 2 months because they are already busy. But what's really interesting is some of the really, really big events, they're not pulling the plug yet. They haven't signed a contract, they haven't given a deposit, but they're still planning their June, July, and August events. So it'll be really interesting to see what comes out with the government and the CDC, if we can even do these events. But they're still coming in, and I think it's really great that a lot of them are continuing to plan their summer events, even with the knowing that it could just pivot and change tomorrow. So it's really interesting to see.
Great, thank you. And I think, so before we move on to the next question, a couple of things that I think are interesting that, again, museums and venues might really want to think about is the cancellation policy, which is something Jan mentioned, and we all talked about on our prep call yesterday, that it's really a great time to go back and look at your cancellation policy in light of what's happened, to develop something that's going to the customers, I think, a little bit more comfortable with your policy and with going ahead and committing now and perhaps getting that deposit out. And the other thing that I think is a really interesting potential type of business that Natalia mentioned is this idea of appreciation events, whether it's an appreciation for your clients, for your employees, whoever it is, that really may end up being a category of event that we see growing post-COVID. So we're going to move on to our next question, which is, apparently I've just lost the next question. Oh, have you noticed any changes, there it is, in the needs of your social clients or in the needs of your corporate clients? And Natalia, why don't we start with you for this one?
Sure. I think being more conscientious about safety, as Jan mentioned, is going to be the big theme. So I think that's what they're going to be thinking about, and making sure that if they are inviting people to an event, that they feel safe and secure. And sharing that information with clients will be really important, and not just for us as a venue or a caterer, but also for us to look at, you know, who are the other vendors that we're working with. Maybe we'll be suggesting a photo booth that uses a green screen rather than a whole bunch of props. So kind of thinking about that also. But, you know, another thing is live streaming for social events, for a wedding ceremony, for those who can't attend. So looking at things a little bit differently that way too, of being able to offer those to clients.
Great, thank you. And Bobby, what about you?
Same. I mean, it's safety first has been the priority for most folks. You know, it's going to really take a hit on our catering sales. You know, as a venue and a caterer, we're looking to potentially reduce capacities of all of our indoor building spaces. And, you know, as a site fee, great, our venue will be fine, but catering and food and beverage, it's really going to hurt. We're looking at sanitizer stations, whether it's standalone Purells like hospitals have on walls. Someone mentioned on yesterday's call about security guards opening doors, and there's just a lot of things that we're talking about every day right now, because obviously we're looking to open our parks to the public. So a lot of that, a lot of those safety precautions are going to be implemented through events as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see the conversations with the wedding couple that maybe booked for 200 people, and you have to turn around and tell them, I'm sorry, we can only do 100 in that space now, which will then go back to the live streaming option potentially. But it's going to be an interesting conversation. People are really, really concerned about the food. It's very interesting to see the debate of, past hors d'oeuvres versus a buffet. What's better, what's worse? People are talking about grab and go options now, that they could just go pick up food and go to their own table. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how it all unfolds.
Absolutely. And Jan?
I think touching on what Robert said, the events are definitely going to change. I think the safety first makes us all look at how we operate and how we do business. Past hors d'oeuvres, I think, is your classic. Take a tray around in a tight room and pass a tray of hors d'oeuvres and expect people to feel comfortable. It's not going to happen for a long time. So we internally are doing a lot of R&D on our existing menus, packaging and containers to see what we could do to make it a little bit more exclusive for each guest without giving up, the sexiness of the actual event. I think logistically for venues in particular, guests are going to look for either a larger room or a smaller guest count, or perhaps a combination of rooms. So, and a fact of maybe it's a strolling menu or strolling entertainment, so that no one is really bunched up in one particular room, which is very different than what we're currently experiencing. My concern in all of this is finding a way to make this cost effective, because everything that we've been talking about really drives up the price. Multiple spaces, all the additional security, changing multiple stations instead of having 2 or 3 stations, maybe it's 6 different stations, and all the individual containers and all that. So as we continue to develop this, I think we have to look at the cost factor for the client and ourselves as well.
Absolutely. And Adelie?
Interestingly enough, because we're not in the planning stages of the events yet. We're more so in the contractual stages. What most of our clients are asking for are addendums to contracts. They're asking for protection at the point of signing the contract. What the new normal is, we internally are having a lot of conversations about that, but I can't think of one client that has said, please detail your safety plan. We're working on what that will look like in the future. But until this is a little bit further along, it's hard for us to surmise what the CDC or, whomever, whatever agency will end up taking, the lead on this as to what will and will not be allowed in terms of public gatherings and, socializing, quote unquote. So right now at the stage that we're working, there's just a lot of requests for protection at the contractual stage. Cancellation policies that give them a wider window, that are more lenient, that refund deposits within a certain time frame, postponement allotments. Like, that's really what we're getting a lot of questions on.
Yeah.
Because, at the point, whatever we're told to do in terms of a sanitation or public safety perspective, I'm sure it'll be the same guidelines for all of us, and we will all follow those,
Absolutely. And I think, a number of people have mentioned what are the new guidelines going to be, and what kind of density are we going to be comfortable with. And I think for, many of our museum clients and other venues on the call, a couple of things I think would be interesting to look into now. First of all, certainly many of you have relationships with caterers, multiple caterers, and I would say start that conversation now about, what are some of the culinary offerings, what are some of the changes you're going to be prepared to offer to clients, and start, getting those menus in place and ready to go. Again, because business, if you're not getting inquiries now, you will be soon, and you want to be able to be prepared to answer that question. And I think the other thing is, in terms of the density piece, look at the spaces within your facility. Perhaps, as Jan said, there's a way to use multiple spaces so that you decrease the density. There may be ways to take advantage of, I know many of our museum clients, unfortunately, have upcoming exhibitions that have been canceled, which may leave spaces available that were not previously used as rental spaces. Maybe you can be creative and use those spaces in a way that allows you to work within the density that people are going to be comfortable with. So let's move on to our next question, Brooke, which is marketing strategy. Has your marketing strategy changed in the short term, and do you anticipate longer term changes? Let's see, why don't we start with Bobby on this one?
Thanks, my favorite. So when it comes to marketing, when I started at WCS about 3 years ago, I pulled out almost every dollar out of conferences, trade shows, exhibitions, print, all that stuff. And we kind of doubled down on digital. We had a small budget to begin with, so I needed to make every penny count. So what we've done now, because everybody's working from home, they have a little bit more time on their plate. So we did pull back on the spending marketing, Facebook paid, Instagram paid, LinkedIn paid, which is underutilized. We pulled back on that, but right now we're going triple down on interaction. So instead of posting maybe 3-4 times a day on all these platforms, 3 or 4 times a week, we're doing 2 to 3 times a day now. And what it's doing is it's allowing us to engage with our audience a bit more. It's kind of free, chiming in on comments, posting more often, liking other people's photos. So we're spending a lot more time interacting with our community versus just paying for ads and letting them run. I don't anticipate us being able to do that when we get back in the full swing of things, but for me, it's just good brand awareness as well as marketing. Events will be back soon, so we just want to be front of mind when everybody's ready to start booking a space. They remember us. So we're just spending a lot of time interacting with the communities right now.
That's great. That's great. Adelie?
So how has our marketing strategy changed? Well, I'm sure, like most people, running a business, we have put a lot of, we have stopped a lot of our marketing in the immediate, future, simply because, right now the number one focus is in protecting the business and the future of the business. And so everyone is in a similar position, and we, are not being foolish about how we spend money. In terms of, our sales team is still engaged, and our sales team is still working, from home as much as they can. They are working from home similar to this. They host Zoom meetings, and we had a sales meeting this morning, and they were working on a virtual happy hour where they would, distribute a game to everyone that would be invited to the happy hour, and all of those people would be playing a game together through this happy hour and drinking a similar cocktail. There's lots of things that we're doing in terms of just keeping the communication lines open with our clients. We are not, being salesy, if you will. This is not the time to be salesy. This is a time to, really care about the people and find out what their needs are, see if there's a way for us to help and support them. As I mentioned, we are cooking every day. And so if and when we can, we deliver food to people that need it, or offer for them to come and pick it up, obviously as hands-free as possible. We're just really being humans and really going at this from a very, from a place of love and caring, and for the long term, we intend to save our business. And so we will, be as flexible and pivot with the times and as much as we need to. It's hard to say right now what that's going to look like, but, we know that change will come, and we're open to it.
Great. And Natalia?
I think you guys have said it all. We're just trying to be sensitive and make our message, more about what we're doing to try to help. rather than being super salesy.
Mm-hmm.
But I did hear something interesting. You know, venues are one of the first, and catering, you know, one of the first choices that clients make in the process of planning an event. So how important it is for us to still be out there and letting people know that we're still here and we're still going to be doing events going forward, so that people can start planning and picking that date, so then they can, you know, confirm their caterer and confirm their photographer and the rest of the vendors that they're working with. So that really kind of struck me when I heard that. I was like, that's so true, that we still need to be there to let people know that there is a future. So we're, you know, right now pausing, you know, being more active in social media, things like that, but kind of keeping that in the back of our mind when the time is right to be there for people to look ahead.
Well, and it's interesting, Natalia, because I know I've certainly read some reports about brides and their mothers who you know, who are stuck at home, or you know, they're planning. I mean, it's a great time to do it because they're stuck at home and they can't go anywhere. And I know we all commented yesterday on your great background, and I'd love everybody to look at Natalia and see her background, which is in fact PEM. And so she's been able to use that as a great sales tool, as have we've another client in Delaware who actually just sold a wedding. It was a brand new inquiry, sight unseen. The client had never been to the venue, and everything was booked through, you know, through Zoom and through their video tours and everything. So I think some of those tactical things might not cost a whole lot right now, but there's certainly things that you can be thinking about in the shorter term. And Jan, what about you?
Well, I think our marketing strategy is changing week by week with the wave of the pandemic. And if I look at March 9th, the day the first event canceled, and what happened that week, and the panic calls I received from clients and brides, it was a week of hand-holding, a week of trying to support people that had spent a year planning event. They were devastated, whether it's their personal or professional, their fear of the unknown. So week one, our marketing strategy was to continue the relationship building that we've always done, and to be there for our clients. So we got through week one, we looked at an empty calendar for the spring, and then the next step was, okay, we are now going into survival mode. And what does survival mode look like? Okay, we have this great drop-off world out there. Everyone is requesting food in their home. Everyone is ordering food online. What can we pull together quickly? So our marketing strategy that second week was, let's take our existing clients and let's do what we do for them all the time for all of their events, and let's take it to their door. So within that week, we started to develop a drop-off dinner service to our clients. Same menu, same level of quality, great packaging. And we were really fortunate because without going outside of our existing client base, they bought it. They were appreciative. They were grateful. So that business went from, you know, 0 to, I'd say, 40% of where we'd like to be in a 3-week period. But somewhere over the past 2 weeks, you know, that nagging, what does this look like when we get through all of this? And some of my corporate clients that have events planned for the fall, you know, we'd be talking every day. How are you doing? What does it look like? I don't know what I'll do for the fall. You know, my clients are nervous. How do we handle that? And that's when the reality of the safe events really came into play. We spent a lot of time internally working on a safety plan, how we operated day by day, how we delivered food, how we executed food. So our first step with safety was to develop a great plan that we could send to our clients. So part of our marketing strategy was, again, to make our clients, our existing clients and new clients, feel comfortable with how we were operating and to build that level of trust. So when we sent out a menu, we sent out the safety plan as well. I got more phone calls about the safety plan and questions about how people could relate do that when they receive food from Instacart or some of the other options. So getting through the safety and, coming up with the survival mode, all right, that's going. Now we're looking at what's the next step. So safety will be a very, very big part of what we do in the next round of marketing, but also looking at unique events and changing and building that level of trust where our clients will feel comfortable changing the way we've operated in the past and just creating really wow menus and presentations that are different and will be compliant with what we expect, the guidelines to be.
Great. And it really sounds like for all of you, I think flexibility and being able to pivot, as to Jan's point, perhaps even week to week, is going to be really important in the coming months. I do want to just, again, for the museum clients out and other venues on the phone, I think this is also a great time to really think about some of the tactical things you could be doing with some of your downtime. So, really going through your website and looking to see, is it as up to date as it might be from an events perspective? Are there videos? Are there great photos? Are there testimonials? Same thing for even, your whatever CRM you're using. How up to date is that? Get it cleaned up so that when we come back, you're ready to start executing some of the things that you're planning on. So Brooke, can we move on?
I was just going to add one point to that, too, is that just piggybacking on what Bobby was saying about social media, this is a great time to just stay in touch with people and utilize this downtime to keep yourself very present. I think that's key to success here in order to keep a certain level of business for when we get back.
Great, thank you.
I'll move on.
And so I think we've probably touched on, if we move to we have two more sets of questions here, and we've talked a lot about some of this, so I don't know that we're going to go through every panelist, but I want to see if anybody has individual things they want to add that we haven't already talked about. But how do you expect events to change after we reopen? We've had a lot of discussion about safety. We've had a lot of discussion about density. Are there other changes that you are anticipating after reopening that we haven't talked on? And I'll just open this up to all the panelists.
I did see someone,
Sorry, go ahead.
I saw someone on the chat pop up about floor plans and how many chairs are at a 60-inch round now. We used to do 10 people at a 60-inch round, and I don't think that'll be happening. So is it going to drop down to 6 people? And that's really going to impact how many people we can put into a space. So yeah, definitely floor plans are going to look different. And again, it's going to, we're going to need to look at what the guidelines are and how people feel.
Great.
I think our business, the nature of our business is definitely a little bit different. I think our events will start out as drop-off. I think a client will ask us to deliver, whether it's stations or what have you, perhaps ask for a bartender, but keep it very light from a labor standpoint. And I do think we'll see a lot of social starting hopefully over the summer, with maybe family get-togethers. People have not been able to get together. They may be a little hesitant with the corporate events, but I think we'll see family functions coming together, maybe post-graduation parties and things of that nature. But although people are comfortable inviting their families into their home, they might not be as comfortable inviting outside staff. So we're anticipating that the first events might be of that nature.
So I actually have a couple of things to piggyback on that. Funny enough, I just got the first draft of our new website this week. So the team and I are actually reviewing that. I mean, for us, we have big open spaces. So I actually expect an increase of new clients because I think people will try to utilize our outdoor spaces, which is a nice change. But what is really interesting, just going back on the last couple of comments about the more formal gatherings versus informal and keeping it more tight-knit. A lot of our business is that HR-driven family day, type of business. So I actually do anticipate a lot of that to return, because I think those events, fundraisers, I think those events and weddings, those are going to be the first ones back. They want to do those HR driven events to show appreciation. They need to do their fundraising events, and obviously weddings will always be around. So I think those will be full swing right away. What I think is really interesting, we kind of touched on the food aspect a little bit and how that's going to change. One of the conversations that we started having is about our wait staff. Are they going to be wearing black gloves? You know, back in the 90s when I started catering, we used to wear those white cloth gloves in our tuxedos and they were so tacky, but you know, it just showed that you had a clean set of hands when you put down a plate. So we started looking at those nice black, usually chefs that do barbecue wear those black latex kind of gloves. So we started looking at those, and is that something that we're going to implement with our wait staff? You know, will they have to wear some type of face mask when they're serving? And we're starting to look at those things as well, because you know, it's not just about the food presentation, but it's going to be about the bartenders and the waiters.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think that's an excellent point as well, Bobby, about outside, people perhaps wanting to have events outside, because I do think people inherently feel safer outside. There's, you know, a lot more air. You're not cooped up. And so, you know, again, for all of the clients out there that do have outdoor space, it's a great time to look at that space and look at whether there are ways that you can book it, make more space. I mean, we all know when we reopen, there's going to be, particularly for museums and cultural institutions, there's going to be a real demand for spaces because programs haven't been held, donor events haven't been held. And so you're really going to have a lot of competition for all spaces. So I think looking outdoors to determine whether there's additional spaces you can create would be a great way to both create new space and help your customers feel more comfortable. And Adelie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I was going to mention that, you know, I think Jan mentioned this, that there's going to be a lot of need for people to have like celebratory type events. You know, I was speaking to a friend who works at Discovery Channel yesterday, and their entire operation, with the exception of the people working like in control rooms at their offices, the entire business is working from home. Every single person was issued laptops, etc. And he was mentioning that it's going so well that they're now evaluating at a senior level whether they would even go back to an office environment, you know, whether they would just keep everyone working from home and then just gather people, you know, on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis to come together to sort of, you know, see each other and be together. It is a mandated obligatory Zoom video every single day that they have to be on. So their meetings are all held virtually and they have to be on camera, but they are not, they anticipate that this is the new normal for them, even after this pandemic passes. So I do think that there's going to be a lot more of that HR related event needed that is not not necessarily at the normal corporate event price point, and it's not, you know, a marketing event for a corporation. It's more of an HR event. I think that will be, you know, really a necessity in the future, because people, regardless, human connections, as you can see, you know, we're all looking at each other on a video screen. Human connections are still necessary regardless. Mm-hmm. That's not going to go away.
I think that's a great point, and it absolutely echoes what I've heard from many of the large food service management companies that we work with across the United States, that they are hearing from a number of their clients that they think the nature of their workforce is going to really change. But you're right, they will want to keep them connected in potentially new and different ways.
That would really increase the daytime event business. I mean, which
Absolutely.
would be great.
Yeah.
Great.
So before we move on to questions, we have one final questions from the audience. That is, we have one final question, which is really more sort of top tips that, you know, if you had 2 or 3 top tips that have been either helpful to you in booking or retaining events that you want to share with those on the line, that would be great. And Bobby, I'll start with you.
All right, I'll stick I'll stick with kind of the digital social media aspect. The first thing I recommend to everyone is LinkedIn. It's kind of gotten real busy last couple of months, but I've been on for about 10 years, and I can honestly say I've developed 6 to 7 figures in each of the businesses I've been in because of LinkedIn.
Wow.
That's a whole nother webinar, but there's a lot of value in B2B and even B2C on LinkedIn. So I do highly, highly, highly recommend you get on there. That's a good spot to start finding new business. Something kind of quirky and fun that we noticed had a really great ROI. After each of our weddings, we would request the wedding couple's photos and let them know that we would love to post their photos on our Instagram. And it started snowballing, and more people kept wanting to be on. And we don't have a big following of Instagram. We have under 2,000 people, but our clients were so excited to be featured on our Instagram. And that was just a great tactic to kind of build our brand a little bit, but then spread the word out. So every time we had a wedding, we request the photos, we'd share it on Instagram, we tag them. Another thing we started doing is anniversaries a year later. We tag them again, we say happy anniversary. So that's been really good because, you know, retaining business is tough. So we do whatever we can to keep our past clients happy, because no matter how much money we spend on marketing, word of mouth will always be number one. So just some tips.
Great. Thank you. Those are great. Jan, what about you?
I'd say the 2 key points would be flexibility, which you mentioned before, and open to change. I think planners, clients are going to be expecting different types of events, and they will expect us to rise to the occasion and come up with creative solutions. And I think the second point would be to stay ahead of the curve. This is the time we have to figure this out. It's now. It's not in September. It's not in October. It's now. We, as the experts, have to be prepared to answer the questions, to provide direction and design, whether it's in our venue or whether it's in our menu package. We have to figure this out, and we have to do it now, because this will end and the events will be back and there will be changes. It will not be the same, at least for quite a while. So we need to be doing our homework now and get out there and be ready for this.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And Adelie, what about you?
You know, I think that we have to, you know, continue to be really honest with our clients. I think we have to, you know, obviously, you know, give them all of their wishes and all of the things that we know we can do, right? Like if this didn't exist and we could just go back to normal, you know, obviously we could just continue to operate the way we did a month ago. But we have to, you know, be honest with them that we're as well as they are learning what the new normal will be. And we have to be flexible and, you know, really listen to what it is that their individual needs are. You know, we've heard a lot of different things that clients are requesting. Some of them are more concerned about the contract, and maybe that's a corporate client or the father of a bride, you know, and maybe, you know, a mother of a bride is more concerned about safety, you know, because her, you know, 95-year-old mother is going to be there and she's in a high-risk group. Like you just have to listen to all of the people that are involved in this process and really try to, as best as possible and as honestly as possible, give them a sense of security. We have also, and I'm not sure if other people on this call have experienced this, but we have also experienced a concern with our like longevity. You know, they hear a lot. There's a lot of noise out there about the food and beverage industry being in you know, being in a really difficult place. And the fact of the matter is that we are. It's not noise, it's the reality. And we know that there's going to be companies that may or may not make it out of this. And, you know, I think that some clients are feeling really uneasy about whether or not, you know, it's safe to move forward with some, you know, with businesses like ours, because obviously we're hurting. And I think that there needs to be some sort of, you know, we all have to have within our own businesses the language and the ability to speak to that, you know, in a way that is truthful and gives them security.
Adelie, I think that's really an excellent point, and I think it's something I just want to again, for some of the museum or venues who are on the call who have smaller caterers on their list or smaller caterers that they work with, I think it's a great time to just have that dialogue to make sure that you understand, how they're faring and make sure that you don't end up in a situation where one or more of your caterers potentially is not able to execute. And I think certainly none of the caterers on this call would be in that situation, but there certainly are caterers who are at a much smaller sales volume level who may really end up in trouble. And I think that unfortunately that could end up reflecting on you as an institution. So I think it is a good time to continue your dialogue with them and be in touch with them. And then Natalia, we haven't heard from you in terms of a couple of those top tips.
So one of my tips is to pick up the phone and call your clients. A lot of what we do is via email, and especially when you have a client that may be on the fence about canceling or unsure what the next step is. Email can be tough sometimes. So kind of picking up the phone and having that more personal conversation with them to find out what their issues are and how we can solve them that maybe they wouldn't communicate via email. So that's been something that I've been trying to do more. And the other
Great.
thing is, I'm trying to send out 2 emails a day, either to a colleague vendor to check in on them, or to a past client that got married at the museum a year ago or 2 years ago. And just, Bobby, I think you mentioned it's word of mouth and past clients and keeping those relationships strong, and just checking in and say, how are you doing? Thinking of you, I'd like to post a picture from your wedding, and just keeping in touch with people and your colleagues, I think is really important right now.
Great, thank you. And I think one of the things I'd like, again, for museums and venues on the call, I'd really like to encourage you to do is take a look at your existing policies with respect to social events and with respect to not-for-profits. Many institutions have rules and regulations regarding who is and who isn't allowed. And while I wouldn't advocate a large-scale changing of that, I think it is a good time to potentially see whether you might loosen some of those things for the balance of 20 in an effort to help you book some events that perhaps you couldn't book before. We were talking yesterday about not-for-profits, and I know many of our museum clients don't allow other fundraisers in their facility. So maybe you, as Natalia has done at PEM, maybe you consider them on a case-by-case basis. Maybe you can become a little bit more flexible. I think if you can demonstrate to museum leadership that there's an earned income potential that will help the institution, it might be something that would allow you to, again, book some of those events and develop some revenue the balance of 20. So I know we have a couple of questions that we can jump over to. The first was Elliot. Hi. I know you asked if we could restate the percentages from the wedding report summary, and the percentages were that 26% of clients were moving to later in 2020, 26.5% were moving to 21, 42% were keeping their date, and 5.5% were canceling altogether. So those are the booking questions. We had 2 questions that are somewhat related with regard to food buffets, food displays. How are you suggesting pivoting to be cognizant of the concerns with regard to buffets and food displays? And more specifically, are there individual containers for catering that you're thinking about that will keep it eco-friendly and safe? So panelists, any input there?
I'd be happy to answer that. I think from displays, an example might be for an Asian station, an individual bento box. We are right now sourcing ones that are environmentally friendly. The question has come up with the new requirements, will there be a need for a sneeze guard, which we're hoping not, but who knows what the future will be. But I think all the individual items that you can provide, at least in the early stages, will give a level of comfort. There are great resources online. We've spent hours and hours getting samples in and looking at it. And the next phase of our R&D will be to set up actual buffets with individual containers. We also have considered hors d'oeuvre stations, so that rather than passing an hors d'oeuvre, you might possibly have guests walk up individually to a station, and as you would do a plated individual small plate station, you would do an hors d'oeuvre station with maybe 2 separate hors d'oeuvres given on a plate to a guest. One of our chefs has come up with a little dome that goes down on top of an hors d'oeuvre. So as you pass a tray of hors d'oeuvre, everyone has their own dome. They take off the dome. So there are great ideas out there. It's a matter of spending some time online and seeing what really meshes with your menus.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have anything they want to add there?
I'll jump in real
I'd
quick.
like to. Oh, sorry, Bobby. I just wanted to mention that some of the, in terms of resources, we do a lot of individually plated small things, and Pack and Wood is a great resource. Sweet Flavor, Florida is another great resource. All of these companies ship. So, I do a lot of research on this, and they all display at either like Cater Source or the National Restaurant Show and National Restaurant Association Show, and they have really great vessels that are enclosed. Pack and Wood and Sweet Flavor, Florida.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, funny enough, I was going to say the same thing. We are concerned about the sneeze guards, but restaurant wear, that's another good one. We're very eco-friendly at all of our parks. It's a very sustainability-driven mission that we have. So that's going to be a little difficult to continue on that path with all these changes. So it's going to be a interesting balance. But people call them different things, but tapas plates, mini meals, tasting plates, just that kind of grab and go, 6-inch, walk up to a station, grab 3 of everything on a plate, walk away, and you get your whole Asian station on one plate. So we're thinking we're going to see a lot of that as well.
Great. And then we did have a question asking us to elaborate on not lowering rates. And I think that it's a fine balance that you need to maintain, because you want to both be sympathetic to whatever economic plight your clients might be in, but you don't want to devalue, what it is you're offering. So I think that there's ways you can work around it to do something that acknowledges the situation everybody is in right now for 2020. And so it might be something like, offering a prepayment discount so that there's a discount if they have cash in hand now. It might be looking at different combinations of spaces that will allow them the same to have their event, but perhaps in a space that's a little bit less expensive. It might be trying to move them to days where there's less demand, so that you can offer them a discount for that. Or it might be throwing in those items that you already own in-house that you typically upcharge for, so it diminishes the profitability a little bit but keeps your rates intact. I know, Bobby, you also felt strongly about that. Are there any other tactics that or things you've been doing that have worked?
I think you got a lot of it. What I thought was really interesting is my youngest sibling's getting married, so little R&D for me, he sends me all of his proposals. And one of the venues actually had a Thursday discounted wedding package, which was, I think it was like 35 to 40% off. And I thought that was something different, but I think people are willing to sacrifice the weekend for something more affordable.
Yeah.
Regarding the actual, fees that we're charging, no matter how big, how small, we all have overhead, we have mortgages, we have staffs that we need to pay. And, we spent a lot of time talking about the new norm, and from what it sounds, the new norm is going to cost us all a lot more. And if that's going to cost us a lot more and we could keep our site fees intact, I think that's a pretty fair balance. I think we're going to be employing a lot of people. The $15 minimum did hit us hard on our P&Ls, rightfully so, I think. But these expenses add up. And if we're not increasing our site fees, then some of us won't be able to survive for next year. So it's going to be a fine balance between all those things. But I do agree with offering cost-effective incentives at a freebie versus changing your site fee is always a nice, easy way to do it.
Yes, absolutely. And then it looks like our final question is, any thoughts on asking clients to purchase insurance for their wedding reception? Now, I know insurance is standard for many museums. I'm not sure whether you're specifically referring to insurance for something along these lines of a pandemic. I know that we were on a webinar probably 2 weeks ago, and there was an insurance specialist on the call. And we're certainly seeing that a lot of the standard force majeure clauses really don't apply to a pandemic. So I don't know whether, unfortunately, I'm not sure whether that question is general or pandemic related, but is anybody changing any of their positions with respect to what clients have to purchase from an insurance perspective?
So Bobby again, sorry. We actually have as part of our contract that all couples, all clients, whether it be a wedding couple or a corporate client, has to have general liability insurance. So we actually put it in our contract, and all social events, we direct them to wedsafe.com. I think it's part of the K&K insurance group. I think it came out to about $280. It's a $1 million, $5 million general liability insurance, and that covers our client. God forbid something happens at their wedding, someone does something crazy and hurts an animal, or they break something, at least our couples, they won't be affected. So we do make that a mandatory thing that everyone has to have that. And then we also tell them, while you're there, check out the event insurance. God forbid something like this does happen. It's usually like $400 or $500, and it'll cover your entire wedding. So one is mandatory, one's optional.
Right. Well, and again, I think from the call we were on a few weeks ago, it sounds like event insurance has become suddenly very, very difficult to get. So that may be changing moving forward in terms of either the cost of it or how readily available it is. So I think that is it. We may have just gotten, looks like that is it. So, and we are just within our hour. So I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to really thank the panelists for taking the time to do this. I hope it was helpful. Please keep in touch. Feel free to reach out to Brooke or I or any of the panelists, and best to everybody. And we look forward to talking to all of you in better times when we can all talk about our successful programs. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.